Thanks for taking the time to listen to our latest content here on the Blood Red channel. Guy here with just a quick message. Do you want the very latest Liverpool FC news directly into your inbox? Well, then sign up to our daily LFC newsletter, which will bring you the breaking news and big events from around Anfield. To subscribe, just go to bit.ly/LFC newsletter. That's bit.ly/LFC newsletter, or click the link in the description of this podcast and pop in your email address. It really is that simple. That link once more, bit.ly/LFC newsletter. Well, thanks for your time, and on with the podcast.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
It's the Blood Red podcast, courtesy of the Liverpool Echo, as we get set to talk through the big talking points at Anfield ahead of the new season. Coming up, we'll be getting into Liverpool's title defence, or fresh assault, depending on your outlook, transfers and that man, Thiago. Plus, what should the Reds expect from Marcelo Bielsa's Leeds United? And of course, we'll give out some tips to steer clear of ahead of the new season and give our team predictions ahead of the opening night at Anfield. Joining myself, Guy Clarke, to get into all of that are our Liverpool correspondent, Paul Gorst, and our chief LFC writer, Ian Doyle. Gorsty, come to you first. How are you keeping?
Not bad. Looking forward to the new season getting underway. Still not going to be quite the same, is it, with no fans in there, and it looks like that. Even that Sheffield United game that was penciled in is probably going to not be the one now, but new season, and looking forward to watching the Reds in action again.
Yeah, kicking off the new season without fans doesn't quite seem right. Project Restart, you could get your head round it, but it does seem a bit weird. Doyle, I imagine you're a bundle of excitement ahead of the new campaign.
Well, the sooner it starts, the sooner it finishes. So even more so this year, obviously, given the fact all the games are played in such quick successions. But yeah, a bit strange. I think the novelty value's worn off now. I think people watching the games will be like, oh, it's great, but it's not what it should be. I think people forget that last season, 3/4 of it was played as normal. It was only the end. Whereas this year, there's the possibility that nearly all of it will be played with nowhere near full stadiums. But, we'll have to take each game as it comes, as they say.
Yeah, I have to say, personal point of view, I'm really looking forward to the new season starting, albeit the last one only just did finish. But it does seem weird, Gorsty, that we are starting without the fans when we know certainly the opening won't be anywhere near the same, albeit Liverpool did have to lift the title in front of an empty stadium.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that struck me last season when Liverpool started against Norwich, I think it took all of about 3 seconds before the fans started singing "We Are the Champions of Europe." And it was quite an atmosphere that night. On the Friday night, fans had obviously been looking forward to it for about 2 or 3 months, and it's just not going to be quite the same, is it? I mean, particularly when you think of how much of an atmosphere would have been generated for this game. Marcelo Bielsa's Leeds United coming to Anfield, first game against Leeds in the Premier League for 16 years, and unfortunately, 54,000 are not going to be inside Anfield, so it's a shame. And we can say hopefully it doesn't go on too much longer, but it's looking like it's going to go on a little bit longer than we originally anticipated, with, as we say, the 12,000 fans, which was the plan, probably subject to a huge review now, isn't it? And all I can say is something that Jurgen Klopp said today, and he hopes that it doesn't go on too much longer, but, such is the world we're living in at the moment.
Yeah, we'll get into Jurgen Klopp's press conference and, as I say, look ahead to the game itself and the season generally. But Doyle, Jurgen Klopp did seem to be in really good form today. And I don't know whether that was him trying to lift what seems to be a bit of doom and gloom around Liverpool fans ahead of the new season, or whether he genuinely was so excited for the start of the new season.
I know it's been a really difficult summer for many Liverpool fans with them only having won the league. It's been a terrible, terrible time for them. And the fact that they could now, I've just been slightly facetious there. I mean, we know we'll come on to it in a bit about transfers. Do we want to do it now or do we want to do it later? Can we do it now? Do it now. All right, then. Transfers. Well, we know there are certain areas of the field, or certainly in the team, that Liverpool perhaps need a little bit of strengthening. I mean, they've sorted left back, but they're now going to hold at centre back. And have they got enough up front in case anybody gets injured? I mean, it's more pressing the fact that they're going to play so many games in such a short period of time. I mean, the fact is the season's basically finishing around about when it would have done normally, yet starting about 3 weeks later. So there's 3 weeks straight off. I mean, there'll only be 8 teams left in the League Cup by the end of September. So it is very odd in that sense, that just game after game, and even the fact that the international breaks, they're now playing 3 games in those, the international teams. And most of Liverpool's players are internationals. It's going to cause not just Liverpool, but every team. There's going to be, there'll have to be rotating players. There'll be players injured. There'll be players absent who wouldn't normally be. You'll see lineups that you wouldn't normally have seen, but that's just going to be the way for this season. So for Liverpool to not have strengthened, and we know the reasons why not, it is a slight concern. However, there's still another month to go before the transfer window closes. We could see an awful lot happen in that time. The uncertainty, as Ghosty said, about the fans coming back in, we might know a bit more. Then clubs will be able to kind of, work to a certain budget, and we know how much finance they've got coming in. So all these things kind of still uncertain. And I think for Liverpool, the good point is that they happen to have the best team in the Premier League at the moment, and a squad obviously capable enough of getting 90 odd points for 2 seasons running. So even if they don't sign anybody, they're still going to be up there. It's just that there will be those fans who believe that now that they're in such a position of strength on the pitch, that it's a bit unfortunate that off it, matters out of their hands mean that they're not as strong as they otherwise would have been.
And I suppose the phrase you could use, Gorsty, is anxiety or excitement, whether it be for the upcoming season or even the transfer window that Liverpool have so far had the anxiety. Maybe centre of defence hasn't been strengthened, and the potential excitement fans want to see with players maybe coming through the door. But I suppose one caveat is Manchester City haven't really strengthened as much as they may have threatened to do. It's only Chelsea who have obviously spent an awful lot of money in strengthening their side, but Frank Lampard downplaying whether they'll be title challengers this season.
Very much so, yeah. I mean, I think a bit disgruntled at the fact that they seem to be the only ones who aren't spending at the moment. But if we look at it, United keep getting linked with Jadon Sancho, but the fact is he's not a Manchester United player because refusing to pay what Dortmund are asking. City are another one. I think City spent more last summer. They've only brought in Ake and Ferran Torres, and for the squad that finished 18 points behind Liverpool, you might have thought that they'd have pushed on a little bit more. And as you say, it is only Chelsea because they have had a transfer ban, so they've had that kind of revenue that they'd normally reserve for last season has been stored up. So they've been, able to do that. And let's face it, they've never been shy of spending above a few anyway, have they, with their owner for the last 15 years or so. So I don't think I do think coronavirus and the whole pandemic has had a big impact on pretty much every club. It's just certain clubs thinking that they're going to have to roll the dice more than Liverpool because Liverpool are settled. They've got a top-class squad, a world-class team. As Doyle says, 97 points in 99. Champions League winners, Premier League winners. So they're not really in a position where they have to go and panic and put themselves under any undue financial pressure just to kind of satisfy the demands of a few moaners on social media. Do Liverpool need to strengthen in certain areas? Yes. They need another centre-back, absolutely convinced of that. Another forward capable of playing in a few positions would be preferable as well. But generally, they're very settled and sorted, and there's not a whole lot to grumble about.
No, and I suppose that's one of the things, really, that you look at it and you see how Liverpool have performed over the last 2 seasons, Dolly, and maybe the anxiety in the fan base, the concerns heading into the new season is whether Liverpool can do it again. But to be honest, the last sort of 2-3 seasons in which Man City and Liverpool have posted so many points, logic tells you that generally you hit 90 points and you're more than likely going to win a league title, let alone having to hit sort of those mid to high 90s.
Yeah, I don't think there's a chance Liverpool get 90-odd points this year. No chance. It's never happened before in English football history that someone's done that for 3 seasons in a row. And I wrote something yesterday about there's only one team retained the Premier League title in the last 11 years, which was Man City, and they needed to get 98 points to do it. That shows you how hard it actually is. I mean, 4 of the champions, I think you look at Chelsea twice, Leicester and United, that 3 of them sat their managers the following season, and they all fell out of the top 4. I mean, I'm not saying that's going to happen to Liverpool. And I think the point there is that Liverpool, because they won by so much, they do have that kind of, they can have a drop-off, because you're asking the likes of, not so much City, because we know that they can do better than they did last year, but you're asking United and Chelsea to make massive strides to get above Liverpool. And if you're talking about going outside the top four, then you're looking at Tottenham and Arsenal and Wolves and teams like that. So for fans to say like, oh, it's going to be a struggle to get into the top four, it's going to be a struggle all season for all of them. That's what it's going to be. This will be the season of attrition, if you want. That's what's going to happen. And one thing that I think is going to be interesting is when Klopp names his team for the Leeds game on today, people sit down and go, where's X, Y, and Z and A and B? And suddenly it's like, oh, Liverpool have got loads of players. It's just that most of them, you look at Marco Grujic and Harry Wilson and people like that, Ryan Brewster, they've just not been playing for Liverpool. They've been playing elsewhere. They are Liverpool players. And that's why, Klopp said in his press conference, which I'm sure he'll mention in a bit, where he was asked about Brewster, that he said, look, we've still got another few weeks to go. We don't have to make a decision yet on all of these players. We'll just see what happens by the time October the 5th. And even then, October the 16th is the date for the any domestic loans, I think it is. So there's plenty of time, and Liverpool have probably played about 37 games by then. So, we can see what happens, but I don't think Liverpool are in as bad a position as in terms of the squad as some fans are saying, not even close. But could they be in a better position, as Gorst said? And the answer is yeah.
Yeah, squad squad building, squad profiling really did come into today's press conference, Gorsty. We best sort of crack on and address that, really, that Jurgen Klopp, if he did have a bee in his bonnet, it was about how the 5 substitutions rule in the 20-man squad hasn't been carried over from Project Restart into the new season. And he was trying to make the point that this wasn't something he was pushing for in terms of an unfair advantage, a big squad having better players. It was more making sure that players aren't picking up these muscle injuries and going into, as they call it, the red zone.
Yeah, he made a similar point after the Community Shield. He's obviously something that he firmly believes in, to the point where he's been unequivocal about it, hasn't he? A couple of times now. He was of the belief that squad should be 20 players with 5 subs this season. And you can see his point. Liverpool are still playing 38 games this season, and the season ends 5 weeks. It starts a month later, and I think it ends about a week, 5 days. I think it is earlier than what last season was initially scheduled to end. So it's very condensed this season, and he's always kind of beating the drum for the health of players and the welfare of players. And he feels that if the top players are injured, then it harms the spectacle, which is true. And obviously, with Liverpool having so many top players, then that inevitably affects them, much like it'll affect Manchester United, Manchester City, Chelsea, any team with top players. You don't want to see Kevin De Bruyne, for example, out for 9 months, do you? Because he's such a wonderful player, and you want to see these players playing every week. So I can see where Klopp's coming from, but inevitably there will be people who don't follow Liverpool who will be saying that he just wants to get an advantage for his Liverpool team and whatever. But if you listen to the Liverpool fans, they'll tell you that they haven't got the biggest and the most expansive squad. So it's more just about helping the superstars and making sure that fans are getting to watch the game with the best players. So I can see his point, but look, it's being made, and Liverpool are going to have to deal with it, aren't they?
Yeah, what do you make of it, Doyle? Do you see where Jurgen Klopp's coming from, or do you think it may be unfair on the rest of the Premier League clubs?
I can see where he's coming from, and I don't think it's a matter of being unfair on the other Premier League teams. I just don't think they should do it anyway. I think five subs is too many. Just disrupts the game. Certainly in the second half, it's harder for the teams to get into any kind of rhythm. It was all very well during the last games of last season because clubs were set in their teams. They knew what the lineups were. They knew where they were in the table. But everybody started from scratch again now. So I'm glad. I'm glad they're not doing it, to be honest, because I also think that. Yeah, I mean, it is a slight disadvantage to the teams that don't have squads. But as I said, we're just going to have lineups now where you'll see players playing he wouldn't normally play. And I wonder whether that is going to come into the thinking of Klopp when he decides which players he wants to keep and not take out on loan. Because let's just say, for example, I mentioned Marco Grujic. He's played 2 years at the Berlin in the Bundesliga as a defensive midfielder. And if Liverpool get 15 games out of him this season, then why wouldn't you want to keep him? He might not want to stay. That's something completely different. But it's whether you could say the same for Harry Wilson. Somebody's played, a season in the Championship, season in the Premier League with Bournemouth. Could he do something? I'm sure if these players aren't moved on, whether a loan or a transfer, then I reckon they'll be playing games because they'll have to. Because there's no way that not just Liverpool, but all of the squads are exactly the same. They're going to have to rotate the players because we saw, example, Man United after the restart where Solskjaer just kept the same team, more or less. And by the time they got to the Europa League quarterfinals and semi-finals, they could hardly run, and that was only like a month. Try doing like 9 months of that. So it's going to be very, very interesting. And, I can see where Klopp's coming from with the substitutions, but also from the point of we're covering these games and they make too many subs and it's hard to keep up with them. So I'm glad it's down to 3.
Yeah, I bet you're glad that they're not going to be having that half-time break within each half as well.
I was never a fan of that. Never a fan of that. Also, if they're doing it this season in the winter, they'll have to be giving them cups of tea and coffee, not whatever energy drinks. Yeah, exactly. Get it sorted.
Yeah, certainly. Gorsty, Doyle mentioned Marco Grujic there, and I just wonder, we've already spoke a bit about the centre-half situation, and if Fabinho maybe is going to be used as a fourth choice option there, I suppose the biggest winner in that position would be Marco Grujic maybe being able to play in that sixth role. And alternatively, another player to have a chat about was Ryan Brewster, who was also brought up in the press conference. If we're not going to see bigger squads, maybe that sort of highlights the opportunity for him, maybe more so, to go back out on loan again.
Yeah, very true. I actually asked Jurgen Klopp about Fabinho playing at centre-back earlier today in the embargoed section. And he basically said, they're going to have to get creative. They're going to have to think of creative solutions to an issue where they've only got 3 centre-backs. So I think it will be a case of seeing Fabinho there now and again if there are injuries to Matip or Gomez, who, let's face it, have had their share of injury problems, Matip in particular. I wouldn't like to see it myself. I think it takes so much away from Fabinho as a defensive midfielder. But it could open the door for Marco Grujic, couldn't it? Because there's no one really out in that squad who's a natural defensive midfielder. So maybe this could finally be Grujic's breakthrough year. I mean, he was Jurgen Klopp's first ever signing, wasn't he, in January 2016? So if Liverpool don't get the offer for him because he is in the shop window, if that doesn't arrive, then he will feature. I can see him turn out in the League Cup and the FA Cup and so on. So could be a decent opportunity for him. And the same with Brewster. I mean, I'm surprised to hear earlier this week that Liverpool are actually still it's on the table that he could be sold. Because I know how highly he is rated behind the scenes, and Jurgen Klopp's always talking about how much of a great young talent he is. So it'd be a shame to see him leave permanently. I was hoping to see him go on loan to a Premier League club and establish himself. And just get to see a little bit more of what he's about, away from the glare and the spotlight that comes with being a Liverpool striker. So we'll be interested to see what happens with him. But it's an interesting one because Liverpool don't have too many strikers, do they? Divock Origi, Roberto Firmino, who's kind of just become a striker across the course of his career at Liverpool. And then Minamino, who's not a striker by any stretch. He's kind of just like a bit of a versatile frontman who floats. So Liverpool are a little bit short in that area as well.
Yeah, it does seem that way. Doyle, what's your take on the Brewster situation?
That's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, obviously, we've seen him play for the last 3-4 years. Seen him come through the ranks. He had the 12 to 18 months, away when he was injured. That has set him back. That did set him back rather quite a bit. I think he is a decent player, but I wonder whether or not he's actually the kind of player who can fit into the way that Liverpool want to play under Jurgen Klopp. Can he be like, we can see the way that they play. Can he be someone like a Firmino, someone like a Minamino? He's not. He's completely different. And that's his main attribute. But does that mean that he's going to be playing for Liverpool often? I don't know. I mean, you've seen what happened with Origi. I mean, he kind of remodeled himself to play on the left wing, and that's kind of been a partial success. But Origi's always better when he goes through the middle. But he's never going to get that many chances because there's now Firmino and Minamino ahead of him, and sometimes there's Salah as well when they play 4-2-3-1. So Brewster isn't really, renowned for playing out wide. He's more, in between the, in the area, 18-yard box, get in there, straight down the centre, get the goals, which is how he scored the 2 goals against Salzburg the other week. But I was surprised to see that he's up for sale. But if Liverpool get 20 million for him and a buyback option, given the fact he's played how many games for Liverpool? About 4, if that, and he's had half a season in the Championship, that would be a good deal. But I think the buyback clause would be something they'd look to put in just in case he becomes a massive success wherever he goes, if he goes.
Yeah, certainly want to keep an eye on. Let's move on then to, I think, probably your favourite topic, Doyley, and that is, we'll do them together. Thiago Alcantara and Gini Wijnaldum. Jurgen Klopp asked about both of those in the press conference, and uncharacteristically was keeping his cards close to his chest.
Yeah, he may as well have just said something like, "Yeah, Thiago, yeah, he's Spanish." He may as well have just said that, mightn't he? It was. What's interested me is that I mean, let's be brutally honest here. There's a chance that he could end up at Liverpool because he's a very good player, and Liverpool would be interested in very good players, but quite a lot of things would have to happen to get to that point. But that's why Jurgen Klopp has never once come out and just said, "No, we're not interested." He's never said it. And to be fair, he never really says it anyway about any players, even when he gets asked. So it's up to us to read between the lines. And I'm sure you're going to ask me about Wijnaldum, and there was some picture from training yesterday where he's got a big cheesy grin on his face, and the likes of Henderson and Robertson are jumping up and down, and people are saying, "Oh, he's clearly just told him that he signed a new deal." And of course, Klopp got asked about that today and went, "Well, no, there's nothing there. We're quite happy with the way things are." So it's like you could read into it one or two ways. That's basically just kind of, about 4 hours before the game tomorrow, Liverpool might just go, "Yeah, he signed his new contract," and then there's like a feel-good factor going into the first game. Or it's the fact that Klopp's quite happy, as he's shown with Emre Can, that, okay, yeah, you don't have to sign this contract, we're just keeping you, unless we get a ridiculous bid. So either way, Liverpool win, they either get a load of money, or they just keep a very good player who would cost a lot of money to bring in, even if they only had it for 1 year. So he's their player, he knows how to play. Wijnaldum, we'll get to the teams later on. I've got him starting. I would imagine nearly every Liverpool fan will have him starting against Leeds. So it's not, it shouldn't be any problem for Liverpool. But yeah, Thiago, I'm actually got to be mindful of what I'm saying here, because people sometimes take the words, don't they, and just, so we shall just, let's just see what happens before the transfer window, because it could go one of two ways.
Yeah, Jurgen Klopp, he said today, didn't he? If he could invent a way to end speculation, he could be a very rich man. I think it's the polar opposite.
He could have just said no, couldn't he? He could have just said, "No, we're not interested in." So he's like, he's quite clever. He's playing along with it.
Yeah, I do find the Wijnaldum Thiago thing quite strange, Gorsty, and how it does all sort of seem to be linked. If Wijnaldum signs a new deal, Jurgen Klopp saying that he speaks to him, he spoke to him a lot. He's his player. He is going to speak to him a lot of the time. If Wijnaldum signs a new contract and the Thiago rumours then subside and go away, you do feel that there's a section of the fan base who'd be rather disappointed with that. Yet Gini Wijnaldum scored 2 goals on Anfield's arguably greatest ever night, and played all but one game last season as Liverpool were Premier League champions, and is such a crucial part of this team.
Yeah, it's been weird to watch it kind of unfold, where Wijnaldum has sort of become public enemy number one now in the eyes of some Liverpool fans, which is just ridiculous. It's almost like that dislike of Jordan Henderson for so many years transferred onto Wijnaldum, and maybe Liverpool fans always need someone to have a dig at now that Day and Lovren's left. But I'd be wary of kind of saying that it is the pervading mood among the fans, because quite often it's on social media where certain people saying it are probably 12, 13, and we don't know, because there's no age verification on Twitter, which I've lobbied for some time now to stop myself arguing with people who are like 10 years of age. Gini Wijnaldum played 37 times last season. He played more than any other Liverpool midfielder, more minutes, more than any other midfielder, I think, in the Premier League. So if you're doubting his importance to this all-conquering Liverpool side, then, as Klopp says, I don't know what to say to you, because he's just such an important, vital cog in that midfield, isn't he? And I think maybe an issue of it stems from the fact that he's asked to do that role in midfield, because you see him when he plays at home, he's encouraged to attack a bit more, and he gets himself in the box and gets himself on the score sheet a lot more. And he's probably happier doing that, because it's a bit more of a glamorous role, isn't it? Whereas in the midfield, it's a bit of a thankless task, and all the praise comes from the fullbacks and the front three. So maybe that's something that he's thinking of. I'm not sure. I wouldn't commit to ever writing something like that. But it's a school of thought, at least.
No, let's move on then to the actual football and get into the discussion ahead of the game that will be taking place at Anfield on Saturday evening. Leeds United coming to Anfield for the first time in 16 years, as Gorst said, Doyley, and without wanting to be one of those, good to have them back in the big time, isn't it?
Yeah, I think they've served their penance for being Leeds. in the lower leagues. I mean, after what happened to them, I think people forget. They massively overspent it. They're an example of what happens when you chase the dream, and it's the old Icarus thing. They flew too close to the sun, and what happened? Oh, yeah, the wings fell off, and then they were in League One a couple of years later. So, it's been a long. Anyone who's been to Leeds, anyone's been to Ellen Road knows it's a great stadium to go to. It's not the newest, the most modern, but the atmosphere is always great, and Leeds always take a great following wherever they go. So, while Liverpool will miss their fans at Anfield on Saturday, I think Leeds will miss theirs as well. So I wouldn't say cancel each other out, but both teams are going to be missing a certain part of how they play the game. And I do wonder actually whether or not Leeds got promoted in the end because their fans weren't there, because they've had a few years, haven't they, where they've got close and then things got a little bit touchy and the fans were getting understandably nervous, and then with them not being there, the players didn't have to cope with that, and they got the job done in the end quite easily. So, Leeds. I think the other thing as well with Bielsa, they had a world-class manager managing the Championship. Now he's where his talent kind of suggests he should be. I don't think they'll have any problem staying up. I think probably this game's come possibly a little bit too early for them in terms of actually creating an upset. But I'd imagine 3 or 4 months down the line, and you're United playing against Leeds or somebody like Chelsea or even Liverpool, it'll be a lot harder. And if they've got their best players fit and the ones that they've signed who are fairly decent, actually, certainly Rodrigo plays up front, if he settles, then they've got themselves a very good striker there, and they've got 1 or 2 other decent players. You've seen, I forgot his name. What's his name? Calvin Phillips. That's it. Yeah. No, Calvin Phillips. He played for England, so they must be doing something right. They got promoted, and I think that they'll. How can I put this? They're more of a Premier League team than some of the teams that have been in the Premier League in recent years.
Yeah, and that was a point that Jurgen Klopp made himself, Gorsty, in the press conference. He was full of admiration for Marcelo Bielsa. I'm sure plenty of Premier League managers will be, but he did also say he actually thinks, not maybe quite in the same manner Sheffield United did it, but actually being in the Premier League will suit Leeds more than what being in the Championship did.
Yeah, he said that in the press conference, didn't he? And he said that on an interview he gave to Sky, which I think is on the telly tonight at 6:00. So he's clearly watched them and got a lot of respect for how they operate with their similar types of pressing style, and obviously not to the same standard as Liverpool in terms of playing staff. But it's going to be a really interesting one. I mean, I can't wait to see Klopp coming up against Bielsa on the touchline. I mean, if you think back to Liverpool's last game at Anfield against Chelsea when there was that flashpoint with Lampard, and can you imagine that with Bielsa on Saturday? I think that would just be incredible to see, and it's a shame that fans aren't going to be there to witness two combative and combustible managers on the sidelines against each other. Different types of characters, but similar kind of determination to win, and I think Bielsa's going to be fascinating in the Premier League, really, because he's not someone who's got a massive honours list, but he's a manager who is revered across football, and Pep Guardiola absolutely loves him, and I think he's going to be great to watch this season.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing him sat on his blue bucket. I'm sure that will be making the visit to Anfield. But Doyle, just on the game and the spectacle of what we'll see, wanted to ask you on this, because I know you wrote the piece after the Community Shield against Arsenal, and it feels as though, yes, it's Klopp v Bielsa, and that's going to get a big billing, but Leeds United v Liverpool and the atmosphere that Anfield would have generated. Gorsty's already referred to the game against Norwich last season, the opening day. It does feel as though Liverpool might miss the supporters and all that the atmosphere of these kind of games brings with it.
Well, that's it. I mean, also the fact that there's been such a short gap in between the 2 seasons. So Liverpool have already played a Community Shield match. It'll just feel like another game for them. They won't realise that it won't feel like anything in particular different to what they've had already, and that's the problem, I suppose. Not just for Liverpool, but for every team. They'll just the whole build up to the start of the season. It's just not there for them.
It does play out. So let's, before we get into our team selections and wrap up for our pre-season.
But have we lost Guy there? I think we have, haven't we? Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
I think exactly. I think his broadband isn't working. So I actually very briefly fit into my old role as presenter then.
I think he was going to ask about predictions, wasn't he? For the season,
He was going to ask for some predictions. So what do you think? Where do you think Liverpool are going to finish?
They'll finish first. They'll finish second.
And what about who's the other team then that you think are going to be finishing in the top two? Is it City?
Yeah, I mean, I think now for years there's been that top six, hasn't there? And I think last season kind of shook that up massively with the emergence of Leicester and Wolves and even Sheffield United to an extent. But I think now it might kind of become almost like a top four for a couple of years now with United and Chelsea. And I think Arsenal are still some way away. I mean, they've got Emma Aubameyang, of course, but other than that, there's not a whole lot to get excited about in that Arsenal squad. So I think they'll be lagging behind.
Not having Tottenham?
No, they've been another one still in transition, happy with Mourinho. So if Liverpool don't finish first, they'll finish second.
Yeah, it's an interesting shout. I mean, are there any teams that you believe that, you look at Leeds, anybody else who you think that could surprise a few? I mean, across the park, Everton have brought off quite a few decent players in the last week.
I think Newcastle have done some really sensible business, actually. Callum Wilson, Ryan Fraser, there's someone else who they bought recently. Seemed to be sound like a good buy. I can't think who it is.
Jamal Lewis.
Jamal Lewis, of course it is, yeah. Which is good business for Newcastle. And Steve Bruce, for all the stick he got and gets, I think he's a decent man, isn't he? I mean, he always seems to do fairly well against Liverpool up and down the years. So I think they could be a little bit kind of advanced on what they were last season. But I think Leeds will do well, to be honest. I mean, I know they almost the annual struggle of to kind of get shattered by a certain point in the season because of how much work they put in. But I think they'll be a bit of a surprise. I don't expect them to be near the relegation zone. I think it could be a tough season for Aston Villa again, especially if they lose Jack Grealish. And maybe Southampton this season seem to be settled, don't they, under Hasenhüttl, and they've got Danny Ings firing. So I think probably more than has been for a good few years. It's going to be a really competitive season.
Yeah, I think possibly the middle teams, that middle group. You look at Everton, you look at, if you have to say Wolves, Southampton, I think will be a lot better than people think or have been expecting, and Leeds again, as I've mentioned, they're going to be not so much up there, but I wouldn't be surprised if they finish top half. I do worry about the other promoted teams, though. You look at West Brom can't score, and Fulham, I'm not entirely sure who they're supposed to be buying. They keep on buying. Anthony Knockout's going to be playing. I know they haven't bought him; he's there already, but he'll be playing in the Premier League again, and he's been in a few times, and he never really lasts more than about 3 or 4 months. So if they're putting their hopes on him, might be a little bit of a struggle. I mean, Guy's obviously back now, so I mean, you've seen Leeds quite a lot on your Preston and Wigan duties in other employment. So what have you made of Leeds last year?
Yeah, no, I think Leeds United, for me, I think of the three coming up would probably be the strongest of the group. I think if the season wasn't as condensed as what it is and you had a week between fixtures, I think the rest would be key for them. I think Jurgen Klopp probably hit the nail on the head. They probably were a Premier League team playing in the Championship. But as you say, Fulham, it does seem to be a weird one. Aston Villa seem to be now going on a spending splurge, but we'll have to sort of obviously wait and see. Obviously, Aston Villa did stay up last season, so we're already in the Premier League. But no, I do think Leeds, probably of the three coming up, would be safest to stay in the division. I take it you guys have spoken about title-winning contenders.
Yes, we've done that. We've done that, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I've not. Gorsty said he thinks they'll finish first. I actually think they'll finish second. I think City. I think the lack of fans is going to work against Liverpool, and it'll work not so much in City's favour, but they'll be affected by it a lot less because of the way they play. And you saw that a little bit towards the end of last season. I know Liverpool had the foot off the pedal a bit, and they need to get back into that rhythm because, okay, I saw some people saying, oh, they've been terrible since January. It's like, hang on, they got 99 points. They can't have been that bad. There's only ever been one team in history that's had more, and I think people forget that because Liverpool set such massive standards for about 18 months that there's going to be a drop-off at some point. And if it ends up being after they'd won the league last season, then that's even, that'll be great for them because then they can just go again this time round. And we'll only know that once they start playing the games. And, for all of the worries about the condensed program that we've all been saying and the season being, squashed, is the fact that once they get over the first couple of international breaks, just game after game after game. And what better way to get your rhythm than actually to be playing games?
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. What about then top scorers? Who do we think the Premier League Golden Boot winner may be? Mohamed Salah and Sadio Mane always seem to be in the conversation. Are either of them going to take it home, Gorsty?
I think it might be your man, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. Actually, I think he's the Arsenal talisman now, undoubtedly, isn't he? And he's had he's been right up there the last couple of seasons. Obviously, shared it with Salah and Mane the season before that. And I think with that new contract, he'll have his tail up and the spring in the step, and I think he'll come out the box or the blocks rather flying. So I'd go with him. But I think Jamie Vardy will probably be up there again if Harry Kane can kind of get himself fit. He doesn't really look fit at the moment, but if he can, then he's obviously going to be up there, as will Salah and Mane, as you say. But Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang for me, I think.
Yeah, I did have Harry Kane actually very quickly in my fantasy football team, and then after watching the internationals, thought no, he's nowhere near ready.
He can't run. He can't run. He's forgotten to run.
No, he does not look ready.
You're going to live who I'm going to pick for a leading scorer after I banned him from our pods earlier this year. That's Timo Werner. I think he'll be the. I think Chelsea will score loads of goals. I also think they'll concede loads of goals. So I don't think they're going to be winning the league. They'll finish third. Actually, they'll be the next best after City and Liverpool. But yeah, I think Werner, if he gets his games, which there's no reason to suggest that he won't, given the fact they spent 50 million on him, and he stays fit, goal scorers, they'll just score wherever, and I think he'll just get loads for him.
Yeah, they're definitely the tips to steer clear then, certainly the ones that Ian Doyle comes out with. But let's get on to our team prediction and team lineups if my internet wants to hold up. But we'll
you've only got 5 minutes, come on, you can do it.
To Liverpool's first selection. Yeah, exactly. First selection of the new season. And I take it all three of us are saying that the man between the sticks will be Alisson Becker.
Yeah, I think in terms of Liverpool team selection this season, there's going to be the usual midfield debate, and then it's a case of who plays centre-back alongside Van Dijk, doesn't it? So Alisson in goal, back four, Trent, Robertson, Van Dijk, and then for me, I'm going to go with Gomez tomorrow.
I agree with that completely.
Do you concur with that, Doyle?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Do you think going forward, though, that it will be the... Do you think going forward that will be the selection, Gomez next to Van Dijk, or do we think Matip might actually be... Because he did start last season as the man in possession of the jersey.
I just think they'll be rotated. As I said before, there'll be, your left backs will get rotated. Robertson with the new lad who Klopp seemed to forget who his name was at the press conference when David Lynch on the standard asked it. Simicast, he said, who?
Yeah,
Costas. Oh yeah. You called him. What did you say? Yeah, you called him that because that's his name.
No, not bad pronunciation. I think it's happened with me when I've had to watch Shaqiri when.
Yeah, Shaqiri, yeah, that was
but yeah, he was talking about Costas Tsimikas.
Yeah, and Nico Williams up against Trent. I mean, obviously Trent's far and away the first choice, but that Nico's shown that he can come in and play a few games when he's required, such as in the Community Shield the other week. So, yeah, I think there will be rotation, but that back four and the goalkeeper. I mean, it's interesting to me, actually, who's going to be on obviously, Adrian will be the reserve goalkeeper, but if Karius doesn't get sold or doesn't leave on loan, I reckon he'll be challenging for that second place for too long because, well, obviously he's got his critics. Karius was the first choice goalkeeper for Liverpool in the Champions League final, and I'm not sure whether Adrian would ever be there. I know he played in the Super Cup, but that's because Liverpool didn't have any other option at the time. So I'd just be interested to see what happens. I mean, there's obviously the reality is Karius hasn't really got a long-term future at Liverpool, but just long-term, short-term in terms of substitutions, I'd just be interested to see who makes the bench.
Yeah, will be an interesting one. What about the midfield lineup then for the game? Jordan Henderson doesn't seem as though he'll be fit. Does Milner start against Leeds United, or will it be Naby Keita? Gorsty, you can kick us off on this one.
I've gone for Milner. I don't think Henderson will be risked, given what Klopp said today. Fabinho and Wijnaldum, and that'll be the three for me. I mean, you can't make a case for Keita, particularly against the team who aren't expected to be one of the the heavyweights this season. But yeah, I'm going to go with Milner. I think he'll just have a little bit of a point to prove and a spring in the step when he's playing against his boyhood club.
Yeah, I think Milner will be
Milner in the Community Shield, didn't he, as well?
Yeah. So Milner will be desperate to play, which is why I'm putting him on the bench. And so I'm going to have Fabinho and Wijnaldum. And I'm going to go with Keita because, I was surprised he didn't play against Arsenal. I was very surprised he didn't play. And when he came on, I know there were other substitutions that changed things, but he made a difference. And I just can't see how he doesn't start.
No, and Leeds do play a very intense brand as well. And without that being a buzzword, it is very, very fast in that midfield. And I suppose Milner, if one thing Naby Keita has over him, it is that mobility and ability to close Harry and get around the pitch a bit more. And then to round us off, then front three, is it? Or is Minamino getting into this team?
No, it's the usual lads for me. The Sadio Mane, Mohamed Salah, Roberto Firmino. We've put Liverpool in good stead, haven't we, for 3 years now? So no reason to change that. Yeah,
it's a bit harsh on Minamino because I think he's been doing really well. But could he be the first sub? I mean, you're looking at if they got next after that Chelsea and then the League Cup game and then Arsenal. He'll start one of those games, at least, possibly two, but not the game on Saturday.
Well, we'll have to wait and see how it does play out. Do make sure that you join us for Monday's edition of the Blood Red podcast. Of course, over the course of the weekend, we'll have the post-match press conferences on the Blood Red YouTube channel, as well as the debrief immediately after the game, as well as wherever you get your audio on demand. The post-game podcast will return in full for the new season. But from myself, Guy Clarke, Paul Gorst and Ian Doyle, keep an eye out for everything over the Echo across the course of the weekend. Thanks for your time and your company. Bye for now.